Introduction. Most people don't realize they've ruined their life until it's almost over. Not because they were evil, not because they were lazy, but because they waited. They delayed. They chose comfort and called it patience. The Stoics warned us about this 2,000 years ago. They said regret doesn't come from failure. It comes from betraying your own potential, quietly, every day. In this video, I'll share 11 unfiltered truths most people only understand when it's too late. These are not motivational ideas. They are uncomfortable principles. But if you understand them now, you may avoid the one thing no success can erase, a life you know you wasted. Part 1. You will regret living on autopilot. Most people believe regret comes from making the wrong decisions. But the Stoics understood something far more unsettling. Regret usually comes from not realizing you were making decisions at all. You wake up. You repeat yesterday. You react. You scroll. You comply. You sleep. And one day, years have passed. This is what the Stoics called living without attention, a life driven not by reason, but by momentum. Marcus Aurelius warned himself of this constantly, not because he was weak, but because even emperors drift. Autopilot feels harmless. After all, nothing is wrong. You're surviving, you're functioning, you're busy. But Stoicism teaches this hard truth. A life without conscious direction will always be directed by something else, by other people's expectations, by habits you never chose, by fears you never examined. And here's the danger. Autopilot does not feel painful while you're on it. The pain arrives later in the form of quiet regret. Regret that whispers, "I knew better, but I never stopped to act." Epictetus taught that freedom begins with attention, noticing your thoughts before they become actions, and your actions before they become character. Because once character is formed, life follows automatically. That's why this truth must come first, before discipline, before courage, before ambition. Awareness is the gateway to all change. You cannot correct what you do not observe. You cannot steer what you do not notice. Ask yourself this, honestly. How much of your day is chosen, and how much is simply inherited from yesterday? Stoicism does not demand perfection, it demands presence. To pause before reacting, to question routines, to interrupt patterns that no longer serve your highest self. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you do the work in front of you, following reason, seriously, vigorously, calmly, you will live well." Notice the first requirement, to see the work in front of you. Not tomorrow's fantasy, not yesterday's regret, only now. Because the greatest tragedy is not a single bad choice, it is a life lived without ever truly choosing. And if you do not reclaim your attention, one day your future self will look back and realize nothing dramatic went wrong. You just weren't there.
Part 2. Comfort is a silent destroyer. Most people believe suffering is the enemy. The Stoics believed something far more dangerous exists, a life made too comfortable. Because pain announces itself, comfort disguises itself. Comfort whispers, "You've done enough today. Tomorrow will be better. There's no rush." And slowly, almost invisibly, it erodes your strength. The Stoics trained themselves to voluntarily step into discomfort, not because they enjoyed suffering, but because they understood this truth. What you avoid weakens you. What you face strengthens you. Seneca deliberately slept on the floor at times, a wealthy man choosing hardship. Why? So comfort would never control him. Because when life eventually removes comfort, and it always does, the untrained mind panics. Comfort is not rest. Rest restores you. Comfort dulls you. It makes effort feel abnormal, discipline feel extreme, growth feel unnecessary. And that is where regret is born. Not from hardship, but from realizing you chose ease over excellence again and again. Stoicism teaches that character is forged in friction. Without resistance, courage has nothing to push against. Discipline has nothing to train. Self-respect has nothing to stand on. Comfort slowly convinces you that you don't need these traits, until one day you do, and they are not there. Epictetus warned his students, "Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish, but wish for things to happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly." But most people invert this. They seek a smooth life instead of a strong mind. Here is the uncomfortable truth. A comfortable life creates a fragile soul, not weak in appearance, but weak under pressure. And pressure will come. Loss, aging, failure, responsibility. When that moment arrives, regret doesn't ask, "Why was life hard?" It asks, "Why didn't I prepare?" Voluntary discomfort is preparation. It's choosing the harder conversation, the earlier morning, the longer silence, the disciplined habit. Not because you must, but because you refuse to let comfort decide who you become. Stoicism does not glorify pain, it respects resilience, and resilience is never built in ease. If you want to avoid lifelong regret, ask yourself, where has comfort made me soft? And then quietly, deliberately, step toward the resistance you've been avoiding. Because comfort feels good now, but strength feels good forever.
Part 3. No one is coming to save you. There is a moment in every honest life when a difficult realization appears. You are on your own. Not in a cruel way, not in a hopeless way, in a clarifying way. Most regret is not caused by bad luck. It is caused by waiting. Waiting for motivation, waiting for confidence, waiting for permission, waiting for someone to notice your effort and intervene. The Stoics considered this a subtle form of dependency. Epictetus was brutally clear about it. If you want something good, get it from yourself. No rescuer is coming, no perfect moment is arriving, no external force is obligated to organize your life for you. And the moment you accept this, something powerful happens. You stop negotiating with reality. Most people unconsciously live as if life owes them clarity. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Clarity is earned through action. Responsibility is not a burden, it is freedom. Because the moment you say, "This is my life, my choices, my consequences," you reclaim agency. Without this acceptance, regret festers. Not loud regret, quiet regret. The kind that says, "I knew what I needed to do, but I waited for a sign." Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily,
Do not waste time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. No debate, no delay, no external validation, just action aligned with reason. Here's the uncomfortable truth. As long as you believe someone is coming to save you, you will continue to betray your own responsibility. And betrayal of responsibility is betrayal of self. Stoicism does not offer comfort in the form of excuses. It offers dignity in the form of ownership. Ownership of your habits, your reactions, your direction, even when circumstances are unfair, especially when they are unfair. Because you cannot control what happens to you, but you can always control how seriously you take your role in it. Regret is born when you look back and realize you waited for courage instead of acting with fear present. You waited for certainty instead of moving with doubt. You waited for rescue instead of becoming reliable to yourself. No one is coming, and that is not a threat. It is an invitation. To stand upright, to decide deliberately, to become someone you can trust. Because the most painful regret is not failing alone. It is realizing you never truly showed up for your own life.
Part 4. Your emotions are not the truth. Few things create more regret than obeying emotions you never questioned. Anger that felt justified, fear that felt protective, desire that felt urgent. In the moment, emotions speak with authority. They feel convincing, they feel personal, they feel true. But Stoicism makes a sharp distinction most people never learn. What you feel is not what is real. Epictetus taught that emotions are not events, they are interpretations. Something happens, your mind assigns meaning, your body reacts. The reaction feels automatic, but the judgment came first. This is where regret enters. Because when you act from emotion without examination, you are not acting freely, you are being pushed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Remove the judgment, and you have removed the thought, I am harmed. Remove the thought, I am harmed, and the harm disappears." This does not mean suppressing emotion. Stoicism is not numbness, it is clarity. It means pausing long enough to ask, what story am I telling myself right now? Most lifelong regrets are sentences that begin with, I was angry, so I said. I was afraid, so I didn't. I felt offended, so I. The emotion passes, the consequence remains. Stoicism trains you to insert a gap, a space between stimulus and response. In that space lives reason, and reason is the difference between dignity and regret. Consider how many relationships were damaged not by truth, but by timing and tone driven by emotion. How many opportunities were abandoned not because they were wrong, but because fear spoke louder than reason. Emotions are signals, not commands. They tell you something is happening. They do not tell you what to do. The Stoic does not deny emotion. He interrogates it. Is this anger protecting something valuable, or just my pride? Is this fear warning me, or trying to keep me small? Is this desire aligned with my values, or just seeking relief? Without this discipline, emotion becomes a tyrant, and tyrants always leave regret behind. With discipline, emotion becomes information, and information allows choice.
The Stoics believed the highest form of freedom was inner sovereignty, not being ruled by every impulse that passes through the mind. Because the most humiliating regret is realizing you knew better, but you felt too strongly to act wisely. Master your judgments, and your emotions will lose their power to sabotage your future.
Part 5. You will regret every time you betray your values. There is a unique kind of regret that never fades. It doesn't come from failure. It doesn't come from loss. It comes from knowing you acted against what you believed was right. The Stoics called this the loss of arete, moral excellence. Not perfection, alignment. Because when you betray your values, you don't just make a mistake, you fracture your self-respect. Seneca warned, "No man can live happily who regards himself alone." Meaning, if your actions serve convenience, approval, or gain, but not principle, you will always feel internally divided. Most people think regret comes from missed opportunities. In reality, the deepest regret comes from moments of self-abandonment. The lie you told to avoid discomfort, the silence you kept to maintain approval, the compromise you made because it was easier. At the time, it felt small. Later, it becomes heavy. Because you remember the moment you knew better and chose otherwise. Stoicism teaches that external success is meaningless if it costs internal coherence. You can gain status and lose yourself. You can win arguments and lose dignity. You can protect peace temporarily and destroy it permanently. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Simple, unforgiving, liberating. Integrity is not loud. It doesn't seek recognition. It is the quiet discipline of acting the same way whether someone is watching or not. And this is why it matters. When life becomes difficult, and it will, you rely on who you have been, not who you hoped to become. If you trained yourself to compromise, you will compromise again. If you trained yourself to stand firm, you will stand when it matters most. Regret grows in the space between who you are and who you know you should be. Close that space, not with grand gestures, but with small acts of honesty, quiet refusals, unpopular decisions made calmly. Because in the end, when noise fades and applause disappears, you are left with one judge, yourself. And the most painful verdict is not, "I failed." It is, "I knew what was right, and I didn't do it."
Part 6. Most people choose approval over freedom. One of the most reliable paths to lifelong regret is invisible. It looks like politeness. It looks like fitting in. It looks like being reasonable. But beneath it is a quiet surrender, living according to other people's expectations. The Stoics understood that the crowd is rarely wise and never responsible for your life. Epictetus was direct. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because approval is never free. It demands conformity. And conformity always costs something essential, your autonomy. Most people do not fear failure. They fear judgment. They choose careers that impress rather than fulfill. They maintain relationships that drain rather than nourish. They silence convictions to avoid discomfort. Each time, the trade feels small, but the accumulation is devastating. Because every time you choose approval over freedom, you reinforce a dangerous habit.
You teach yourself that your life belongs to the audience. Stoicism rejects this entirely. It draws a hard line between what is in your control and what is not. Your values, your actions, your effort. Public opinion does not make the list. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "I do what is mine to do. The rest does not disturb me." Approval is unstable. Today it lifts you, tomorrow it disappears. If your sense of worth depends on it, you will always live defensively, calculating, adjusting, censoring. That is not peace. That is captivity. True freedom begins the moment you accept this. You will be misunderstood, and that is not a flaw in your life. It is proof you're thinking independently. The regret comes later, when you realize how many decisions were made not from reason, but from fear of being judged, fear of being different, fear of disappointing, fear of standing alone. But Stoicism teaches that standing alone is often the price of standing upright. Approval feels safe, freedom feels risky, but only one allows you to respect the person you see in the mirror. And when life ends, there is no audience, only memory. Choose accordingly.
Part 7. Time is the only non-renewable asset. Everything in life can be replaced. Money returns, opportunities reappear, relationships can be rebuilt. Time never does. The Stoics treated this not as a dark thought, but as a clarifying one. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Most regret is not about what we did wrong, it is about what we postponed until it was no longer possible. The conversation you meant to have, the path you meant to explore, the discipline you meant to start someday." Someday is the most dangerous word in the human language because it quietly assumes time is abundant. Stoicism destroys that illusion. Memento mori is not about fear of death, it is about respect for life. When you remember that your days are numbered, trivial distractions lose their grip. You become selective. You stop feeding habits that do not nourish you. You stop giving years to things that will not matter at the end. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Not tomorrow, not after success, now." Time reveals priorities whether you choose them or not. If you do not decide what deserves your time, something else will decide for you, and that something else rarely has your long-term peace in mind. Regret arrives when you realize how much of your life was spent on autopilot distractions, busy, entertained, occupied, but not fulfilled. The Stoics did not rush, they focused. They understood that a meaningful life is not built by doing more, but by wasting less. Ask yourself, where is my time actually going? And more importantly, is that where I want my life to go? Because every hour is a trade, and one day you will see the total. Make sure it tells a story you respect.
Part 8. Avoiding pain guarantees regret. Most people spend their lives running from pain. They avoid hard conversations. They avoid uncomfortable growth. They avoid risks that might expose them to failure or rejection. It feels logical. Why invite suffering? But Stoicism reaches a conclusion that most never consider. The pain you avoid today becomes the regret you carry tomorrow. Pain faced is temporary. Pain avoided accumulates. The Stoics did not seek suffering, but they refused to negotiate with reality. Amor fati means more than accepting fate.
It means embracing the challenges that shape you, not because they are pleasant, but because they are necessary. Every meaningful transformation demands discomfort. Strength requires resistance. Wisdom requires error. Courage requires fear. When you refuse pain, you also refuse growth, and regret is simply growth that never happened. Seneca observed, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body, but only if you engage them." Avoidance feels like safety. In truth, it is stagnation. Most people who regret deeply did not fail spectacularly. They played it safe. They stayed silent. They stayed small. They stayed comfortable, until time removed the option to choose differently. Stoicism teaches that pain is not the enemy. Meaningless pain is, the kind endured for nothing, resented, resisted, misunderstood. But pain faced voluntarily in service of virtue leaves no regret. You may fail, you may struggle, but you will not look back and wonder what could have been. Amor Fati asks a difficult question. Can you accept everything that happens as material for growth? Because when you stop resisting hardship, life stops feeling like a punishment and starts feeling like training. Avoid pain and you avoid life. Face it with reason and regret loses its power.
Part 9. You become what you rehearse daily. No one wakes up one day and becomes wise, or disciplined, or courageous. They rehearse it, every day in small, forgettable moments. The Stoics understood that character is not declared, it is practiced. Epictetus reminded his students, "No great thing is created suddenly." Your future self is being trained right now by what you tolerate, by what you repeat, by what you excuse. Most regret is not caused by one catastrophic choice. It is caused by thousands of small ones made without thought. Skipping the hard task, avoiding the truth, indulging the impulse. Each time it feels insignificant, but habits compound, and they are indifferent to intention. You don't become what you want, you become what you practice. Stoicism teaches that every action is a vote for the person you are becoming. There are no neutral actions. Every day you rehearse either discipline or decay, courage or avoidance, attention or distraction. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But thoughts lead to actions, and actions repeated become identity. Regret comes when you realize you trained the wrong self, not maliciously, unconsciously. You didn't plan to become impatient, weak, or resentful. You practiced it. The Stoic solution is not intensity, it is consistency. Small acts of restraint, small acts of honesty, small acts of effort, done daily. This is why Stoicism emphasizes routines, reflections, and self-review, not to judge yourself harshly, but to correct the course early, because habits are easiest to change when they are small, and nearly impossible when they have become who you are. If you want to avoid lifelong regret, ask yourself, what am I rehearsing every day? Because one day you will perform it, whether you meant to or not. Part 10. Death clarifies everything. Most people avoid thinking about death. They treat it as morbid, unnecessary, negative. The Stoics considered this avoidance a mistake. Because nothing sharpens life like remembering it will end. Marcus Aurelius wrote this repeatedly, not as a warning, but as a tool. You could leave life right now. Not to frighten himself, but to cut through illusion. When you remember death, trivial concerns lose authority. Petty arguments shrink. Ego softens. Priorities rearrange themselves without effort. Death does what motivation cannot. It clarifies. Most regret exists because people live as if time is guaranteed, as if they will always have another chance to speak honestly, another year to try, another season to become who they intended. But death does not negotiate, it does not warn, and it does not care about your plans. Stoicism uses this fact not to depress, but to liberate. When you accept that your time is limited, you stop postponing the essential. You stop living for appearances. You stop tolerating what drains you. You begin to ask a different question. If this were the end, would this matter? If the answer is no, release it. If the answer is yes, act on it now. Seneca advised, "Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life, not because the end is near, but because clarity is rare. Death offers it freely. Regret fades when your actions align with what truly matters, and nothing reveals what matters faster than the knowledge that this will not last." Remembering death does not steal joy, it removes distraction. And in a focused life, there is little room for regret.
Part 11. Regret is the price of unlived potential. There is a final form of regret that overshadows all others. It is not about mistakes. It is not about losses. It is not even about suffering. It is the regret of knowing you could have lived differently. The Stoics called this failing to live according to nature, not meaning comfort or instinct, but reasoned potential. Every person has capacities they feel quietly, strength they never tested, truth they never spoke, discipline they never sustained, a life they sensed but never stepped into. This is the regret that appears at the end. Not dramatic, just heavy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Why? Because unlimited time makes courage unnecessary. Urgency reveals character." Stoicism teaches that peace does not come from achievement. It comes from alignment, from knowing your actions matched your understanding, from knowing you didn't betray the person you were capable of becoming. Most people regret not failing. They regret not trying. Not because success was guaranteed, but because effort was possible. Potential unlived becomes self-accusation, and no amount of external success can silence it. The Stoics believed that a good life is one where you can say, "I did what was mine to do." Not perfectly, not effortlessly, but honestly. Regret disappears when your days are spent in pursuit of virtue, clarity, courage, discipline, justice. Not because life becomes easy, but because it becomes yours. And when the end comes, as it comes for all, you will not ask, "What if?" You will say, "I lived in accordance with what I knew to be right." And that is enough.
Conclusion. If there is one lesson the Stoics leave us with, it is this. Regret is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself in moments of failure. It arrives quietly, years later, when life slows down enough for honesty. You don't regret the pain you faced. You regret the truth you avoided, the courage you postponed, the life you knew you were capable of living but delayed. These 11 truths are not meant to motivate you. They are meant to wake you up, because awareness is the beginning of freedom. Discipline is the price of self-respect, and peace comes from alignment, not comfort. You cannot control how long you live, but you can control how deliberately you live. So don't wait for clarity. Act, and clarity will follow. Don't wait for confidence. Move, and strength will appear. And don't wait until regret becomes your teacher. Let reason guide you now, while choice is still yours. If this message resonated, take a moment to reflect, not on what inspired you, but on what you will do differently today. Subscribe if you want more timeless Stoic wisdom focused on discipline, clarity, and inner strength. And share this with someone who is drifting, not because they are weak, but because no one ever taught them how to live awake. Remember, the goal is not a perfect life, it is a conscious one, and that choice begins now.